اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد. خل المقادير تمضي لا تغالبها، فإن من غالب الأقدار مغلوب. إن القضاء لسيف لا يقاومه شيء من الخلق إلا وهو محبوب. وامشي رويدا مع الأقدار في مهل، فإن من يكره الأقدار متعوب. سلم وفوض لحكم الله محتسبا، فإنما الأمر مقضي ومكتوب. والله يقضي بما شاء وكيف يشاء، والعبد عبد ومخلوق ومربوب. ولم يزل ربه الرحمن يكلأه، باللطف والحفظ محفوف ومصحوب. حسن ظنونك بالرب الكريم، ولا تسيء ظنا فتبقى عنه محجوب. واعمل لنفسك أعمالا تسر بها، فكل ما يفعل الإنسان محسوب. إن كان خيرا فخير سوف يحصده، أو كان شرا فتنكيل وتعذيب. يا ويل من ضيع الأعمار في زلل، وكل من كسبه الآثام والحوب. واطلب علوما مع إقبال مع عمل، فأنت بالعلم والأعمال مطلوب. واحذر زمانك هذا إنه زمن، به المناكير شاعت والمعايب. فكن وحيدا فريدا خاملا حذرا، فإن فيه الأقاويل الأكاذيب. والظلم فاش بلا لوم ولا نكر.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Inshallah ta'ala, we will continue with our lesson in the book of Nur Idah, written by Al-Imam Sheikh Hassan bin Ammar Ashwun Bulali in Fiqh of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa. And we pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us with these lessons and make it a reason we our sins are forgiven, your prayers are answered, inshallah ta'ala. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. So inshallah ta'ala we will continue from where we stopped in our last lesson. So last lesson we were basically speaking about water. What are the types of water that are permissible for ablution? So we have covered this part, but maybe just we do a bit of revision before we continue from where we stopped. So the author mentioned that there are water that are not permissible for us to use in ablution. This is what he said. ولا يجوز الوضوء number one بماء شجر وثمر. So water that comes from trees and fruits. These are waters that we cannot use for ablution, because they are not considered to be mutlaq, as what we mentioned. ولو خرج بنفسه من غير عصر, even if it is not squeezed, and this is based on the sound opinion in the madhab. And this is an invention by Al-Imam Al-Maghirani in his book Al-Hidayah. This is the prevailing judgment. So we do not make any differentiation whether a certain type of food is squeezed or not squeezed. So this is the opinion that is chosen in the madhab. And then he mentioned wala bima in zala tab'uhu bi tabghi aw بغلبة غيره عليه, water that is used for cooking. So once we cook and we use water for cooking and changes in the state, then we cannot use it for ablution. Likewise, if any of the properties are changed in terms of the color, in terms of the smell, in terms any of the taste. So we have any to look any at the state any of water before we can know whether it's permissible for us any to do ablution with it or not. Then any he speaks any about al-ghalaba. Ghalaba any is the overwhelmingness, any how any do we ascertain at what any extent that we can use any the water for ablution and we cannot use any for ablution. So when it becomes any overwhelming to such an extent that it cannot be classified as water anymore, then we cannot any use it for ablution. So here any he goes on any to speak any about some any of these rulings. So this is what any he said. He explained any the word al-ghalaba. So he mentioned wal ghalabatu fi mukhalatatil jamidati. So number one, any he mentioned any about al jamidat. Al jamidat are basically any the things that are solid, that do not mix any with water. So he began any by speaking any about as to whether that this thing that is placed any in water, is it a form any of solid, or is it a form any of a substance that can be mixed any with water. So we have any this term in fiqh and we call it the jamidat and the ma'i'at. So jamidat are solid things like wood, and for example he gave any some examples, and later on we will see. So there is a difference between putting something that is solid in water and putting something that dissolves in water. So there is a difference between putting al-jamid like wood in water and putting sugar dissolved in water. This so sugar is a form of ma'i'at, whereas wood is a form of jamidat. So he began by speaking about if the thing that is placed in water is a form of a solid jamid. Then he mentioned bi ikhrajil ma'i an riqatihi wa sayalanihi. If we were to place something that is solid in water and it changes the state of water to such an extent in terms of its composition that it differs with normal water when it comes to its sayalan. Sayalan is the flowing. You see, the density of water differs. If you were to put something into water can become dense due to other substances that are mixed with it. So if it changes the characteristics of the water, in the sense that it loses its properties and its characteristics as normal water in terms of its lightness and non-density, if it changes in that state, then that water cannot be used for ablution. But if it doesn't change the density of the water and the thickness of the water in such an extent that the water is still flowing normally as mutlaq water is, then it is still considered to be pure and can purify. So here the Hanafites and scholars speaks about riqa and sayalan in terms of its thinness and in terms of its flowing. So if the substance is added into water that doesn't change these properties of the thickness and also the flowing of the water, then it does not remove the ability of this water for ablution. We can still perform ablution with water. So it shows that nothing much of the water has changed, because the density of the water is not affected by the solid that has placed in the water. طيب. And then he mentioned وَلَا يَدُرُ تَغَيُّرُ أَوْصَافِهِ كُلِّهَا بِجَامِدٍ. When comes to the properties of water in terms of awsaf, it goes back into the color, it goes back into the taste, it goes back into the smell. So the author mentioned when comes to the changes in terms of these three properties of water, by adding in a solid in the water, it doesn't affect the water, meaning we can still use the water for ablution. We can still use the water for ablution. So here we make a differentiation between putting a solid in water that changes the state of the water in terms of its flow, that it becomes more dense, and putting a solid in water that changes one any of the properties any of the water, but this is a solid. So if it is a solid, even it change any of the properties any of the water, it is still considered any to be pure and can purify. When do we say that this water cannot be used any for ablution? When it change any the density any of the water in terms any of the flowing and the riqa. That's what you mentioned. These two things, riqa and sayalan. Yani the thickness any of the water and the flow any of the water. So let me give you an example. You see, when we speak any about water, and when you pour any water, there is there is this the thickness any of the water. Yani it can be understood. But the moment for example you mix any with sugar, for example, or you mix any with something that make any the water, for example, a bit of solidify, for example. So in a sense that when you pour any the water, now the water pours any slowly. Now this kind of water cannot be used any as ablution, even though if the thing that is placed in water is a solid and not any from the liquid, not from the ma'iat, but it is from the jamidat. But when comes any to the properties, the three properties in terms any of the smell, in terms any of the taste, and in terms any of the color, it doesn't any matter if one of it any is change any the property any of the water, if the thing that is placed any in the water any is a solid. So this is where the author is saying wala yaduru tarayyuru awsafihi kulliha, the three properties, bijamidin, with a solid, and then he gave an example kaza'faran. So now we have the leaves of saffron. Saffron is known. So now I take any saffron and I put any in water. I put any in water. So we ask this question: any saffron, is it solid or liquid? Solid. It is a solid. So if you were to put any saffron in water, and it changes the color of the water, for example, normally saffron it will change the color of the water. But if it is just a little of saffron, where although it changes the color of the water, but it does not change the state and the density of the water. So it is permissible for us to use in ablution. Wa fakihatin, likewise putting a fruit inside what? A fruit is a type of a solid substance. So when we put a fruit in water, surely water has effect with the food, but since it is a solid, it does not make the water unsuitable for ablution just by placing the solid into water. And even any of the properties change, it does not make the water unsuitable for ablution, unless if the change is drastic. It changes drastic to an extent, it changes the density of the water, as what we mentioned. Likewise, wawaraki shajar, the leaves of the trees that fall into water, it does not make the water unsuitable for ablution, even though it changes the properties of the water, but the change is a slight change. So the thing here that we can understand is that if a solid is placed in water, if there is a slight change, it is forgiven. It is still considered to be mutlaq. It is still considered to be mutlaq, unless if the change affect the density of the water and the flowing of the water and the thickness of the thickness of the water. Because now we say now this is a drastic, this is a drastic change. طيب. So this is the concept of ghalaba, as what the author is saying. So he is giving us a principle. How do we ascertain that the changes that occur in water, whether it is suitable for ablution, not suitable for ablution? So he began by speaking about jamid, that's what we mentioned, the solid. Now the second thing, he speaks about the ma'i, the liquid substances that are mixed with water. So it carries a different ruling. So number one, I believe is understood. Then number two, he mentioned wal ghalabatu fi mukhalatatil ma'i'at. Yani al-ghalaba, this overwhelmingness that changes the states of the water by the mixing of al-ma'i'at, yani liquid substances. So for example, sugar, salt, water, and so on and so forth. So number one, he mentioned bizuhuri wasfin wahidin min ma'in lahu wasfani faqat. So when it is something that is a liquid and it possesses two characteristics or two properties, kallaban, like milk. So he said milk, he has two things, two properties. What are the two properties yani, that milk has? Color, whitish in color. Number two yani, is the taste. It does not have any smell. So this is an example. You have any milk that has no smell. It only has color and taste. So this is an example if two of the three properties are present. If two of the two properties are present, then we say that this particular milk is not suitable any for us to make any ablution. Why? Because it suffices us even one any of the properties any is present. Even though one any of the properties any is present, like the property any of color, it suffices any for us to ascertain that this liquid cannot be used any for ablution. So this is what the author is saying. Bizuhuri wasfin wahidin. Only one property is present from something that has two properties, like milk. It has two properties. That is the property any of color and the property of taste. So if only one property is present, it is enough any for us any to say that it is not any suitable for us to use this liquid any for ablution. So for things that has two properties, it suffices any if one any of the properties any is present. So if you have milk any, for example, color and taste, now we cannot use it any for ablution. So number two, bizuhuri wasfaini min ma'in lahu awsafun salatha. But what if a liquid any has three properties, like vinegar? Vinegar has color, has taste, and has smell. Three properties. So he said that if two any of the properties any are present, color and taste, it suffices us any that this cannot be used as a form any of ablution. Now, two any of the properties are present in something that possess three properties. Then the next one he mentioned, wal ghalabatu fil ma'i alladhi la wasfa lahu. So now he break this up into a few parts. Number one, we mentioned a liquid that has two properties, like milk. Number two, a liquid that has three properties, like vinegar. Number three, a liquid that has no properties. Now, just like what? Ma'al musta'mal. Last week we spoke about musta'mal. When we take any ablution and we collect any of the water from ablution, this is used water. So used water in terms any of the properties it does not change. In terms any of the taste, in terms any of the color, in terms any of the smell. But it is something that we cannot use it any for. We cannot use it any for ablution because it is musta'mal. It is water that is used. So there are certain types of water that even though the properties are not present, in terms of the color, in terms of the taste, in terms of the smell, we cannot use it any for ablution. So this is an example he gave, ma'ul musta'mal. The second example he gave, ma'al ward al-munqati'u ra'iha. Rose water that has no smell. Now you have rose water, pure rose water, and has no smell. And it takes the color water, it doesn't have any smell, and it doesn't have any taste. So now when he mentioned takunu bil wazn, we have to take into consideration the amount. How large is the amount of this water? If it is 100% rose water, of course we cannot use it any for ablution, just like any water that is musta'mal. But here the author mentioned, what about if something like the rose water or ma'al musta'mal that is mixed with ma'al mutlaq? If it is mixed with ma'al mutlaq, how can we ascertain that this water now can be used for ablution or not ablution? So he said takunu bil wazn. If we look at the density and also the amount, how much of this water and how much of the mutlaq. So he gave this example, fa in ikhtalata ratlani min al ma'il musta'mal. So you have two rattle is form of measurement. So for example, we say 2 volumes, 2 volumes of water with one of used water with 1 volume of mutlaq water, pure water. So you have 2:1 ratio, 2:1, 2:1. La yajuzu bihil wudu. It is not permissible for us to take ablution with water that is overwhelmed by used water. So now when we mix it, Use water any is more any than the pure water. Now this confirm any, we cannot use it any for ablution. Khalas. Why? Because any the ratio of the used water any is more than the pure water. So this is the first any situation. But then any he mentioned wa bi'aksi hijaz. But if the opposite is permissible, opposite the permissible meaning one. Just already we mentioned ratio 2:1, used water and pure water. 2 used water, 1 pure water, not permissible because used water is more than pure water. But what about any 2 pure water and 1 any used water? 2 volumes any of pure water mutlaq with 1 volume any of musta'mal, we mix, then we can use it any for ablution. Why? Because in terms any of the quantity, the pure water any is more than the use any water. Now, so this is the second thing, the third thing. The fourth thing, and he mentioned wa rraed ma'un najis. Ma'un najis, yani water any that is mixed any with impurities. Wa huwa alladhi halat fihi najasa, yani it is water any that is mixed any with the impurities, that is the najis. Then he mentioned wa kana rakidan qalila, and this water that is mutanajis, that is mixed any with najis, it is qalil. It is qalil rakid, yani it is something any that does not flow, and it is a little any in amount. So here any we have any the differences any between the madhab al-Imam Shafi and the madhab Imam Hanafi with regards any to what is the meaning any of little any in water. Because then we have the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, إِذَا بَلَغَ الْمَاءُ قُلَّتَيْن لَمْ يَحْمِلِ الْخَبَثِ. If water yani reaches any qullatain, yani it does not any bring about najas. It is not any mutanajis, because any water yani has the power yani to repel impurities and if it is a lot. So what is the boundary of a lot here, and what is little when it comes any to water? So these are based any on the ijtihad. In the Hanafi any madhab any, of course any there are differences, but the opinion any that is what you call it, that is taken as mentioned any by the author of Al-Lubab, is ashara bi ashara, yani 10 arms length by 10 arms length. I mean if it is a square, 10 arms length. 1 arms length and is about 46.2 centimeters. 1 arms length, zira, and is about 42 yani 0.6 any centimeters. So 42 times 6 you times 10. So this is the length. And then 42 times 6 same distance, the width. So the length of the width, this is with regard any to a square. The length any of the width any is 10 arms length. How much any is 10 arms length? So 1 arm's length is about 46.2 centimeter. This is mentioned by Dr. Ibrahim al-Silkini, any one of the scholar in the contemporary any scholar in the Hanafi madhab, because centimeters any during the time of the Prophet ﷺ any is not used. Not today any we use any centimeters and meters. So it is about any 46.2 any 1 zira, any 1 arm's length. So it's ashara bi ashara. So 10 any zira, any 46.2 any times 10. You get any about 462 any centimeters. So it's about 4.62 meters. 4.62 meters of no. So we times 462 any centimeter with 462 centimeter. 462 any centimeter we times 462 centimeter. So this is the measurement any for the qullatain. And then when comes any to the depth, there are differences, whether it is 1 arm's length or the size any of about 5 any centimeters, because the Hanafi scholars any mention when a person is able any to take any the water without any the water touching any the base, so it is about any 5 centimeter. So from there any we can times. We times any 46.2 centimeters times 46.2, and then any we times 5. Then any we times any 5. That is any the quantity any of qullatain. So now any if it is anything lesser than that, they said wa kana rakidan qalilan wal qalil ma duna ashrin fi ashrin. This is what any he meant. Maduna ashrin bi ashrin. There is any ta'liq here. Hada qawlu Muhammad. Any Muhammad al-Shaybani, one of the students of Al-Imam Abu Hanifa. Wa huwa ma rajjahul mutaakhirun. The later scholars in the Hanafi madhab do tastarjih to this opinion. 10 by 10. Ashara bi ashara. Ashara dira, ashara dira. Tawsi'atan ala nas. And to make it easy for people. La siyama al-awam. He mentioned wa amma fi zahir riwayah. But in the book of Zahir Riwayah, and these are one of the books that are used as what you call it, reference, and in the madhab also. فالمعتبر فيه أكبر رأي مطلًا. Then this is mentioned by the author of Al-Lubab. There are some differences when it comes to this. والمراد بعشر he say أي عشرة ذراع. 10 arm's length. Then he gave what you call it, this some what you call it, calculation here. So 46.2 as what we mentioned. So 46.2 times 10. So you get 462 centimeter. And then that is also that is the breadth. And then 5 centimeter is the umq al-hawd. So we get about this is the amount 106,720. What you call it, this centimeters muka'ab, in terms of the masaha, this is in terms of the space, so this is what is meant by two qullatain. Anything that is less than this is considered to be a little. Then he mentioned fayanjusu biha wa illam yadhhar atharuha fi. So if a najis falls into water that is a little rraed, and it is not flowing, because flowing has its own ruling, then it becomes mutanajjis. It becomes mutanajjis, even though we cannot see the effect in the change of the properties, because since it is water that is little najis, and it comes in, and this is the same in madhab Shafi'i. But when we differ in terms of the kullatain, but when comes to little water, it becomes mutanajjis, even though najis fell into it, even though it didn't change the properties of the water. Aw kana jariyan wa dhahara fihi atharuha. Water that is flowing, and we can see the change in the state of the water, then it is also mutanajjis. Wal athar, the thing that change, he mentioned ta'am aw launin aw rih, either one, whether it is in terms of the taste, in terms of the color, in terms of the smell, so it becomes mutanajjis, if these properties are there when it comes to flowing water. Wal khamis ma mashkukun fi tahuriyatihi. The fifth one is mashkuk meaning there is doubt in terms of his purity. It's better for us to avoid. Wa huwa ma shariba minhu himar aw baghl. Ma shariba minhu himar aw baghl, donkey drinks from this water, and donkey is a type of animal that we can eat. We cannot eat the flesh. Likewise when comes to baghl is what you call it, is an animal that is a mixed breed, mixed between donkey and horse. So in the Hanafi madhab, it depends on the mother. If the mother is pure, for example, the mother is a horse, father is a donkey, then it is pure. It is considered, it takes the ruling of the mother, which is a pure animal. But if the mother is a donkey and the father is a horse, now it takes the ruling of the mother. So it becomes what you call it, the water is not suitable for us to use for ablUtion. Wallahu a'lam. So by this we have completed this fossil. Inshallah, in our next lesson, we will speak about fi bayani ahkami su'ur. Su'ur is the water that is balanced after the drinking. After we drink water, the balance is called su'ur, and the plural is asar. So the author will speak about some rulings with regard to this type of water. Wallahu a'lam bis-sawab. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali sayyidina Muhammad. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhaban nar. Sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
فكن لبيتك حرصا لا تفارقه إلا لشيء له في الشرع تصويب واذكر إلهك ذكرا دائما